Okay, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a piece of text that honestly reads way more like a gripping, ancient political thriller than your standard historical record. We are going to unpack the incredibly dense, cinematic prophecy of Isaiah's vision, looking specifically at the first 10 verses of Isaiah chapter 21. We're talking about the dramatic, catastrophic fall of one of history's absolute greatest empires, Babylon. Through the eyes of a prophetic watchman, we literally get a front row seat to a stealth invasion that permanently changed the course of human history. So let's just jump right in.
Right off the bat, in verse 1, the vision opens with this super cryptic phrase, the burden of the desert of the sea. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth can a desert be a sea? Well, this is actually pointing prophetically to Babylon. At the time, Babylon was this massive, thriving, heavily populated metropolis. But the prophet is seeing its ultimate gritty fate, a city that's going to be swept by a whirlwind of destruction from the south and eventually turned into a desolate, marshy wasteland. It's painting this picture of a violent southern tempest just rushing in to completely wipe out the landscape. And in verse 2, this impending doom is called a grievous or dreadful vision. A command rings out. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. Now here is where it gets fascinating. Elam and Media are the tribal names that historically become the Persians and the Medes. Persia wasn't even a unified nation when this was written. The prophecy is boldly stating that Babylon, the ultimate playground bully of the ancient world, the great plunderer, is about to get plundered and completely destroyed itself by these encroaching Medo-Persian armies. The sheer violence of what the prophet is seeing in verse 3 causes a visceral, literal, physical reaction. He describes being seized by pangs of a woman that travaileth, which means a woman in labor. He is literally bowed over in distress. But, these labor pangs are symbolizing way more than just the prophet's personal empathy. They actually represent the painful, sequential rise and fall of entire ancient empires. It's like a giant, agonizing puzzle.
Think about it like this. Just like progressing labor pains, the ancient world had to endure a brutal, rhythmic progression of colliding empires. It goes from one violent contraction to the next. First, you've got the rise of Assyria, followed by its bloody fall. That gives way to the rise of Babylon, which then leads directly to this impending Medo-Persian invasion we're talking about in 538 BC. Each empire's collapse is just another labor pain, ultimately leading to the birth of a brand new era, which for the captive Jewish people would mean their eventual, long-awaited return home in 536 BC.
Moving into verse 4, the prophet states, "The night of my pleasure hath he turned into fear unto me." Now, the Hebrew word used for panted here is really interesting because it implies staggering around or being giddy and intoxicated. And this isn't just some poetic metaphor. It points exactly to the gritty reality of Babylon's capture. The city wasn't taken after some grueling, months-long, starving siege in broad daylight. No way. It was captured during a reckless night of drunken revelry and feasting. That night of pleasure literally morphed into a night of staggering terror.
Verse 5 drops us right into that scene of absolute indulgence. Prepare the table, watch in the watchtower, eat, drink, arise ye princes, and anoint the shield. They're feasting, having a great time, but suddenly the music stops and the panic call comes to anoint the shield. This was a real, tactical, historical practice. Soldiers would rub oil all over their leather shields so that enemy swords and arrows would just glide right off. But the vision implies these Babylonian princes were so busy partying, they had completely neglected this absolutely crucial military precaution. And guys, this is verified by history. Historical accounts from Greek historians like Xenophon and Herodotus, plus the Book of Daniel, hit the nail on the head here. Xenophon actually notes that Cyrus the Great knew the Babylonians were throwing this massive drunken festival. So, while they're partying, Cyrus pulls off an absolute mastermind move. He opens the dikes and diverts the mighty Euphrates River, which normally flowed right under Babylon's massive, impenetrable walls. With the water dropped, the Persian soldiers simply marched right into the city through the muddy riverbed. Just incredible.
Now, amidst all this chaos, verse 6 shifts our perspective completely. God gives a distinct command. Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he seeth. Conceptually, Isaiah is placing himself, or a visionary watchman, high up on a lofty stone watchtower. This guy's entire job is to gaze out into the deep, quiet, eerie darkness of the eastern desert and report back on the unfolding judgment. It creates this incredibly tense, cinematic atmosphere of just waiting for the inevitable to strike.
So you gotta put yourself in those shoes for a second. As that watchman stares diligently into the deep, shadow desert, straining his eyes against the pitch black, what exactly is approaching the great city? what is going to break the silence of that night?
In verse 7, he finally spots movement. He sees a troop of horsemen riding 2 by 2, and specifically, men mounted on asses and camels. Now think about that. You don't typically take a bunch of donkeys and camels into a high-speed chariot charge, right? But this aligns perfectly with the historical records of the Persian army. Both Herodotus and Xenophon recorded that the Persians extensively utilized asses and camels to carry their massive baggage trains. So the watchman is literally seeing the logistical backbone of a very real, very massive invading army creeping toward the city under the radar.
Suddenly, in verse 8, the tension just snaps. The text says he cried a lion. Well, actually, scratch that. It's more accurate to say he cried out like a lion. He roars with this loud, deep, booming voice. He's been waiting so long, daytime and whole nights, that he's become impatient and just completely exhausted. And this serves as such a powerful metaphor for us. We are often tasked with tirelessly watching over our own lives to avoid falling into ruin. And let's be real, sometimes that long wait can feel incredibly tiresome, much like the Jewish captives waiting 70 years in Babylon for their deliverance. Finally, verse 9 brings the ultimate climax. Escaped men flee from the city, and the definitive message is delivered. Babylon is fallen, is fallen. The great empire is broken. And what's super significant here is that the prophecy notes, all the graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. The invader, Cyrus, hasn't just defeated a military force. The very religious and cultural idols of Babylon have been completely shattered, marking a total historical overthrow in 538 BC. It's just so brilliant to see how this dreadful vision is fulfilled. It takes what started as a highly symbolic, esoteric prophecy, full of labor pains and desert whirlwinds, and grounds it directly into gritty, undeniable reality. The supposedly impenetrable city of Babylon, with its massive walls, fell in a single night of drunken vulnerability to the Medo-Persians. Then we hit verse 10, and the vision concludes with this deeply poignant metaphor. Isaiah declares, "O my threshing and the corn of my floor." After all the violence, the staggering fear, and the crashing of massive stone idols, we're left with this serene, quiet, agricultural image. The prophet has faithfully declared what he heard from God, and he frames this entire geopolitical catastrophe as a massive threshing process. To put that into perspective, in the ancient world, a threshing floor is the ultimate symbol of judgment. It's where the valuable, life-sustaining grain is violently beaten to separate it from the worthless chaff and straw that just blows away. In this context, the entire empire of Babylon is the chaff being blown away by the winds of history. But the corn of the floor, the remnant of the Jewish people, is safely preserved through the judgment. Because Babylon was threshed, the captive Jews were separated out and freed, allowing them to return to Judea just 2 years later under the decree of Cyrus.
So, wrapping up this explainer, we've seen how meticulously history validated this watchman's vision, all the way from the neglected shields to the diverted river. But it leaves us with a final, deeply personal question to chew on. If even the greatest, most impenetrable empires of the ancient world can fall and be thrashed like wheat to fulfill a greater purpose, what protective watchtowers should you be standing on right now? And what threshing floors are currently shaping the direction of your own life today? Keep watching, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.